Welcome back, everyone, to the light novel Tensei Slime summary series on AniMonolith. Picking up right after the last chapter, after observing the battlefield on the Dworgen border and getting critical intel from Laplace, Rimuru made a bold decision. The mission to infiltrate the Empire would begin immediately, ahead of schedule. The official reason? To rescue Yuki. But Rimuru's real concern wasn't just Yuki, it was Velgrynd. With Velgrynd absent from the Imperial capital to support Kigali's ritual, this was the best chance to breach Imperial capital undetected. Rimuru's plan was clear: eliminate the Empire's elite forces during this chaos, and then force Emperor Rudra to the negotiating table. The team stuck to their original strategy, used Laplace's teleportation gate to reach Imperial capital. Of course, there was still the risk of a trap. After all, could Laplace really be trusted? But Rimuru chose to believe him, moved by Laplace's visible pain and sincerity. Benemaru's team also set aside their lingering hatred of the moderate clown troupe to cooperate. With that, the emotional groundwork for the raid was in place. Diving into the tactical side, Laplace revealed that Kigali was currently casting a forbidden summoning spell called Dead Birthday, a ritual that uses corpses to create monstrous undead elves. At minimum, it would take 2 hours to complete. Velgrynd was guarding the ritual, which meant Rimuru's team had a window of just over 2 hours to strike. To execute this, the strike force split into 2 teams. Gabil, Hakurao, and 400 elite warriors, supported by the 3 primordial demons, would head to support King Gazelle. Their job was to stall for time while avoiding a direct clash with Velgrynd. Meanwhile, Rimuru, Benemaru, Sue, Diablo, and Shion would infiltrate the Imperial capital. The plan was risky, but every move was calculated. Rimuru decided not to interfere with the ritual, at least not yet. If only a few undead were summoned, they could be handled. But if Velgrynd were provoked, the cost would be catastrophic. That's why Ultima and Carrera were assigned as a safety net, ready to intercept Velgrynd if she turned hostile. Their only job? Buy time. Testarossa also offered to join the defense against Velgrynd. Rimuru hesitated. Her strength would be better used inside the capital, but Sue volunteered to go instead. With that, the infiltration team was set. Rimuru, Benemaru, Diablo, Shion, and Sue. Then, just as plans were finalized, King Gazelle arrived on the battlefield. Vesta spotted him through the magical feed. No time to waste. "Let's move out," Rimuru commanded. The operation had begun, and with it, the long, long night ahead. After stepping through Laplace's teleportation gate, Rimuru's group found themselves in a strange, lavish room that looked nothing like their destination. It resembled an imperial palace, definitely not what they expected. At the far end of the hall sat a golden-haired man on a jade throne, with none other than Velgrynd standing beside him, dressed in an elegant Chinese-style outfit. Rimuru was stunned. Why was Velgrynd here? She was supposed to be on the battlefield. Before anyone could make sense of the situation, they sensed dozens of powerful presences hiding in the shadows. It was a trap. All eyes turned to Laplace. Had he betrayed them? But Laplace looked just as shocked. Even he couldn't believe what was happening. This was clearly not part of the plan. Then Yuki appeared, smirking in full villain mode, and praised Laplace for fooling Rimuru. He declared it was time to kill the Demon Lord. That pushed Shion and Sue into full battle mode, radiating bloodlust. Benemaru and Diablo, on the other hand, remained calm, something that impressed Rimuru. When Rimuru asked if Benemaru still trusted Laplace, Benemaru just replied that he was waiting for the perfect moment to snap 2 necks at once. Classic Benny, still as savage as ever, married life or not. But Rimuru had already figured it out. Yuki was being controlled, most likely by Tatsuya Kondo. Even if Yuki wasn't himself, he was still cunning enough to try and sow distrust among Rimuru's group by framing Laplace. Seeing Laplace desperately trying to defend himself, Rimuru placed a hand on his shoulder and publicly cleared his name, shutting the farce down. Rudra finally stood from his throne, saying he wanted a word with Rimuru before the fighting began. Velgrynd followed closely behind him, creating a defensive barrier that shielded them both. Just from the sheer presence radiating off Velgrynd, it was obvious this was the real Velgrynd. So who the hell was the one at the border earlier? Rimuru kept his cool and admitted that while this meeting wasn't part of his plan, having a conversation might be worthwhile. Rudra waved his hand and 2 chairs appeared out of nowhere. He invited Rimuru to sit and began what looked like a formal diplomatic talk. Behind Rudra stood the 4 Imperial Knights that Benimaru had been warned about. On his left was Damrata, and next to him was the still-controlled Yuki. Velgrynd stood at Rudra's right. It was clear, aside from Kondu, every major figure in the Empire was now in one room. On Rimuru's side, his own elite were nearby. Diablo, Xion, Sue, and Laplace. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Rudra opened the conversation with pleasantries, then casually dropped the bomb. He'd sent 1 million troops into battle, and none had returned. Not a single one. He was genuinely impressed and a little pissed. Then came the real shocker. Rudra revealed the Empire's master plan, orchestrated by none other than Lieutenant Kondo. Every move, from Clayman's manipulation to the mixed-core slaughter, had been Kondo's design. Even Yuki's rebellion had been part of the plan. He let it happen just to gather more intel before wiping out Yuki's elites. Kondo used the 60,000 corpses from the mixed core as sacrifices for Kagali's forbidden summoning spell. It was all a setup. By drawing Rimuru's elites into a trap and distracting Guy Crimson at the border, Kondo intended to strike Tempest next. And as the cherry on top, while Guy was distracted, the Marshal, presumably Kondo himself, would invade Tempest and challenge Veldora directly. Rimuru broke into a cold sweat. Somehow Velgrynd had appeared in 3 places at once: the border, the capital, and now Tempest. How was that possible? Raphael answered, "Parallel existence." It wasn't a clone or illusion. It was full consciousness split across multiple bodies. Unlike Sue's shadow clones, which were weaker and couldn't use high magic skills, each of Velgrynd's avatars was the real deal. They shared power, replenished each other's energy, and could keep fighting even if one body was destroyed. The downside? The more avatars she created, the more her power was diluted. But as a true dragon, with near-limitless magic and regenerative capabilities, that weakness barely mattered. Rimuru realized the truth. Defeating Velgrynd was impossible under normal conditions. Even Testarossa had admitted she couldn't match the Crimson Dragon. Still, Rimuru wasn't ready to throw in the towel. Velgrynd's power may have been split, and that meant maybe, just maybe, Veldora wouldn't lose to her. And with that glimmer of hope, the battle of wits between Rimuru and Rudra began. Velgrynd sneered. "You're just like my foolish brother, stubborn to the end." Clearly, she was talking about Veldora. Rimuru couldn't help but feel a little bad for his dragon friend. Living with someone like Velgrynd must have been hell. After analyzing Rudra's grand plan, Rimuru and Raphael came to a chilling conclusion. The Empire was just stalling for time so they could defeat and capture Veldora. Without hesitation, Rimuru opened a soul corridor to contact him. On the other end, chaos. Velgrynd had launched a full assault on the labyrinth, trying to force Veldora out. Rimuru trusted his friend wouldn't lose to a parallel existence, but to be safe, he gave Veldora the green light to go all out. Veldora didn't hesitate. He'd been waiting for this. "Leave it to me!" he roared, ready to throw down. Back at the negotiation table, Rudra made his move. He offered Rimuru a deal: surrender, and the Empire wouldn't invade Tempest. More than that, he'd make Rimuru a Grand Duke, an absurdly high honor normally reserved for those of royal blood. Even by Imperial standards, this was unprecedented. The Empire never accepted surrender, they conquered. But Rimuru didn't take the bait. Instead, he counter-offered a non-aggression pact with no demands for reparations. He knew it was just a temporary fix. The Empire would eventually break the treaty. Still, it would buy time to study their enemy and prepare for the next move. Rudra laughed. He saw Rimuru's offer as naive, dismissing it as a failure to recognize the Empire's mercy. Even after losing 1 million soldiers, Rudra showed no remorse. He believed that only through total unification, by force, could true peace be achieved. To him, stripping away freedom was a necessary sacrifice for eternal harmony. Rimuru disagreed. He also dreamed of a peaceful world, but one built on mutual respect and free will, not blind obedience. Rudra's ideology might sound noble, but in practice it was just tyranny wrapped in idealism. Their philosophies were polar opposites, and they clashed hard. The debate got heated, but in the end, Rudra made one last push. He again urged Rimuru to serve under him. At the same time, Velgrynd raised her finger and activated a projection spell, showing the battle at the Dworgen. What Rimuru saw crushed him. Testarossa, Ultima, and Carrera, the 3 primordial demons, the pride of Tempest, had been defeated by Velgrynd's parallel existence. The image showed them rising to fight again, but they were clearly outmatched. The only reason they were still alive was because Rudra wanted to give Rimuru a chance to surrender. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Gabriel and his squad were struggling against Kondo's elite troops. Overhead, Imperial airships had arrived, unleashing even more reinforcements. The chaos was overwhelming. Even Yuki's old allies, Tyr and Footman, had entered the fight, now clearly enemies. The situation looked hopeless. Rimuru realized Rudra's true goal. If he could get Rimuru to join him, Veldora would follow. Veldora never listened to orders, but he did trust Rimuru. That trust was what Rudra wanted to exploit. But Rimuru stood firm. No deals, no surrender. He refused. And with that, diplomacy was over. Once again, Rimuru and Rudra locked horns in a war of ideals. Sitting silently until now, Velgryn's patience finally snapped. Watching her emperor calmly debate a lowly demon lord like Rimuru disgusted her. She had heard enough. No peace? Then there would be war. Catching the signal in Rimuru's eyes, Diablo and the others prepared for battle. Rimuru was ready to strike down Rudra right there. But before anyone could make a move, Rudra shifted the conversation, this time bringing up Veldora. Instantly, Rimuru's focus snapped to his friend. Before he could even attempt contact, Velgrynd conjured a new image, a battered Veldora in dragon form, clearly wounded. "I will show no mercy," she said coldly. "That child only surpasses me in one thing, his amount of magicules." And just like that, Velgrynd vanished. Something was off. Rimuru's gut twisted with unease. Velgrynd's parallel existence was powerful but had a limit. It drained energy rapidly. That should have tilted the fight in Veldora's favor. But even now, he couldn't win. Worse, Rimuru could feel Veldora's growing anxiety through the soul corridor. This wasn't looking good. To make things worse, as Velgrynd's projection faded, her main body on the dwarf border also disappeared. "You do realize what's happening, don't you?" Rudra said, smug as ever. "Once this battle ends, I'll offer you one more chance. Perhaps then you'll understand how foolish you've been." Despite losing his strongest ally, Rudra remained unnervingly calm. Rimuru couldn't understand it. Why was the Emperor still so confident with Velgrynd gone? But now wasn't the time to dwell. Instead, Rimuru turned back to the image of Veldora's battle. The camera showed a blazing crimson dragon, Velgrynd's true form, roaring into the sky. The clash of the true dragons had begun. And that's where today's video ends. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next AniMonolith recap.